Hey. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you, and thanks for everyone joining us here today. We have what I hope is a great afternoon planned, and I look forward to networking with you at the end of the day so you can give us your thoughts and honest feedback. For me, I wanted to share a little bit about my story. I'm super excited to be here at Google at this time, and for those of you who don't know me, I spent 30 years in banking in many different roles. In my last role, I was the CEO of Citi FinTech, and in that role, we were tasked to do two things. First was prove that we can run at the speed of a startup inside a 200-year-old company. And secondly, demonstrate that we could drive new sources of revenue while devoiding ourselves from the traditional P&L and putting the customer at the center. For me, this ignited a passion for me, and I firmly believe that this industry is ripe for what I would call profitable disruption. I believe there's an opportunity to drive revenue while placing the customer at the center, and I believe the technology truly is going to be the key to unlocking this opportunity. And that's, for me, why I decided to join Google and Google Cloud. What blows me away about Google is the intensity of the technology, the breadth of solutions, the depth of our impact, and the rapidly growing number of case studies we're seeing and success stories we're seeing from customers all around the world. We really and truly are just getting started. So today, we want to share our thoughts on how emerging technologies will impact this industry. We will discuss what needs to be true to unlock these powers in a safe and compliant way, being responsible and respectful, and how to think about the organization's impact when leading these newer technologies. We will discuss how our customers are leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning in their businesses today, and use cases to consider that really, truly only begin to scratch the surface of the art of the possible. Our interactive breakouts that you get to go to this afternoon will dive into these topics with demos as well in both sides of the hall. And throughout the day, you will get to hear from innovative leaders in the industry that are leading change within their overall organizations. So I think since the 1950s, technology has been seen multiple shifts that have revolutionized computing, and therefore the product offerings in this industry. This has unlocked the advancement of how companies serve their customers today, and while each new technology gives us a little bit more, I believe we're at the point of another major shift with AI. As AI continues to evolve, it is likely it will likely further change customer expectations and how businesses choose to interact with their customers. And new businesses will emerge as a result, just like what we saw when we saw the transition and the shift to mobile. And I think we all know mobile banking has become the primary method of account access for nearly 50% of Americans, compared to only 15% who use bank tellers as their primary method. Even my mum considers herself a digital banker these days, and my kids can't fathom why you'd ever actually need to go to a branch. So what happens when everyone has access to AI assistant that has the world's information curated at their fingertips? We're working with financial firms leveraging this technology to power new client interactions, automate manual processes, and gain new insights through troves of data. Through these shifts, we've seen how customers interact and demand information from their banks. Even though we've made great progress, I still ask myself, why does it take more than 30 days with countless pieces of paper to apply for a mortgage? Why is it still so hard to predict and manage my own financial life versus having to employ somebody to do that? I personally predict, and you can quote me on this, we are going to see more change in financial services over the next 12 to 18 months than we have done in the last 20 years. And technology will be the key to unlocking this. I think we know the landscape has changed and customers have a far greater thirst for their financial knowledge. However, they have long since skipped the step of getting that from the traditional sources. In recent analysis, when asked, where do you get your financial information from, customers will typically trend towards saying Google or families and friends over their own personal financial institution. And with the rise of social media as a source of financial information, I think we all see out there on our social media platform of choice that there's constant and barrages of information being provided to us from people that are quite often less than experts. But what we have seen is 45% of consumers want financial services brands to provide support from someone who is familiar with their needs. FIs often think of financial advice being about the products that they offer their customers, such as savings accounts, checking account, loans, mortgages, or investments. However, customers often ask for advice in a more conversational way, especially when they are early on their journey thinking about their financial goals. A customer might say, I need to save for a new car, or I need to start a college fund for my daughter, or I want to buy a home versus I need a mortgage. Leveraging conversational AI, especially coupled with sentiment analysis, enables banks to respond earlier in the journey and focus on building a relationship of trust for when a customer is ready to take that next action. It's important for organizations to understand that their customers' intent is now different and they expect more. Detecting sentiment is critical in how we serve them with the right product and services at the right time. A question we should all be asking ourselves and those around us is, how do we ensure we are leveraging this technology to both better our products and deliver on what our customers expect from us? I recognize that change is difficult, though, in an industry that is fraught with challenges, but also opportunities. From external pressures of changing customer expectations to, we've all seen recent bank failures, to new asset classes with the rise of crypto, as an example, to the constant of internal pressures around regulations, cost of doing business, and we all know now that we're starting to see that rising war on talent. So fines around sanctions for AML, as an example, in KYC, reached $5 billion alone in 2022. In addition, technology spending on risk management in this industry will reach nearly $110 billion this year, 2023. And when it comes to talent, 40% of all open roles at major banks are reportedly now AI-related roles. So we're starting to see that shift in expectation. But all is not lost. Financial services have done what they do really well and are rapidly exploring new ways to deal with these headwinds. If you're reading the headlines today, it's obvious that organizations are not sitting around waiting to leverage AI, especially generative AI. They are already exploring and implementing this technology now, today. Financial firms are using AI to support the entire value chain throughout their organization. You'll see later how a marketing example has the ability to significantly advance and adapt the way that these functions are run. There's a huge opportunity to automate internal operations, including the regulatory and compliance functions. Customer interactions will change, and it's time to start thinking about how branch operations can truly be elevated. And then there's the opportunity to enhance developer productivity. At Google, we're already seeing a large shift internally by using technology and predict an uplift of anywhere between 25 and 45%, depending on the industry and the teams that you're on, in truly accessing and unlocking that opportunity. All of this culminates with the intent to improve operating margins and deliver a more personalized customer experience. This evolution means that companies need to change their way of thinking. This isn't a 3 to 5 year journey anymore. As an example, we recently built out a use case in 15 minutes that replicated services that had previously taken an organization over 18 months to deliver. That's the power of this new technology, and this is going to be the new way of working. The key is the ability to move at speed and have the underpinning of security and data to enable this shift. To be honest, the technology shift is happening so fast, we have had to change this message multiple times just in preparing for this event alone. But that's a good thing, because it means that we're being informed and we get to harness the powers of generative AI working with our customers, many of which are in this room. While most organizations are at the very beginning of their generative AI journey, the majority of CXOs recognize it will soon become critical to the success of their organization. In a survey of CXOs attending Google Cloud's Executive Forum earlier this month, 96% of them said that AI will soon become critical to the organization and to their success, while another 55% said they feel a high degree of urgency around adopting generative AI. At Google Cloud, everything we do is focused on delivering an enterprise platform that helps you to unlock new revenue while managing risk and delivering an experience that will both attract and retain customers. We wake up every day thinking about the interconnectedness of product, business services, and technology. And technology is truly what gives you the ability to unlock these services. And collectively, we believe we can drive the revolution in this industry. So how do we enable this revolution, you may ask? We've been working to deliver business applications that can help financial firms simplify their operations and deliver new experiences. And I promise you, you're going to get to hear about some of those shortly. We've been focused over the last few years on delivering the fundamental building blocks to modernize call centers, automate manual processes, and all while delivering best-in-class security. This technology powers Google's suites of offering, and we are harnessing and externalizing this to bring the power of Google to all industries, not just financial services. Imagine not bringing that experience to your organization. A search engine that can mine all of your internal data safely and securely, but also delivering it with the ability for users to have a conversational interface via a dedicated enterprise search tool. So enterprise search plus generative capabilities. Each of these core building blocks create distinct value for financial firms. We are also focused on simplifying what it takes to adopt these capabilities in specific areas and functions at a financial institution. And today, you may have already seen in the press, I am happy to unveil the next offering in our journey with today's AML AI announcement. Thank you. We are excited to announce that Google Cloud has launched an AI-powered anti-money laundering product specifically for financial institutions. This product will transform AML by applying our advanced AI technologies and our thought leadership in risk anomaly detection. Money laundering is a complex problem with a growing global impact. The amount of money laundered each year is estimated to be 2 to 5% of the global GDP, or up to $2 trillion annually. And our solution replaces legacy transaction monitoring systems, which are often based on static models with an AI-powered product that significantly improves financial crime risk detection. But don't take my word for it. Take it from our customer, HSBC, who's been able to identify 2 to 4x more suspicious activity while reducing alert volumes by more than 60%. As a result, HSBC was awarded the Salient Model Risk Manager Award for 2023. And today, I'm excited to announce that we have Jennifer Calvery, the Group Head of Financial Crime, Risk and Compliance, to tell us a little more. So welcome, Jen. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Let me maybe start by just saying a few words about the business problem that we were seeking to solve together with Google and Google Cloud. So HSBC, we're one of the world's largest banks. We're in more than 60 countries around the world. We have more than 40 million customers. We are wanting to make sure that our products and services are not exploited by individuals who would use them for crime. We review more than 1.2 billion transactions every single month to look for signs of financial crime. Last year, we filed over 73,000 suspicious activity reports globally. So that means That's a report when we tell governments around the world we think someone has used our products and services to engage in crime, terrorist finance, money laundering, tax evasion, fraud, bribery, corruption, proliferation financing, really nasty stuff. And we don't want individuals exploiting our products and services in that way. Our job is to prevent them from doing that, and if they do get into our bank, to find them as fast as we can and to get them back out. So it's a scale problem for us. So around, a few years ago now, we said to ourselves, and I remember distinctly being in a boardroom with our leadership saying, imagine a world where we use all of the data that we have at our disposal to understand the probability that any given customer or their counterparty is going to use our products and services to engage in financial crime today. And imagine that we could update that dynamically and that we could do it in as near as real time as possible. That was the dream. We had absolutely zero capability to do this. We were using the same rules-based systems that everyone in industry was using at the time. They are not real time. It's not all the data at our disposal. There's thousands of people whose only job it is to close out noise because they generate so many false positives. And when you look at the technique for actually identifying financial crime, it's not very good. It is, I'm a former prosecutor. I did many investigations. I never once tried to find a criminal by looking at transactions one at a time to then tell me if someone was a criminal. That's just not how you find criminals. So we wanted to invent something new. We knew that the scale we were operating at, we would need the processing power of the cloud. And we already had a partnership with Google Cloud more broadly across our bank. So it didn't take us long to realize that we could really, in working with Google, we could bring the strengths of our two organizations together to crack this problem. We could help with domain expertise around financial crime and how it's committed at banks. We know everything there is to know about working with regulators and being in a highly regulated industry. Google, I think, speaks for itself in terms of Google Cloud and what that brings, the tools on the cloud, and the amazing people at Google and the expertise they bring in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and how to use their own products. So together, we went on this journey. That you just heard the product that's being announced today. We couldn't be more excited that this product's going to be available to others in industry. We wanted to be thought leaders, but we wanted fast followers. So I'm hoping we'll have fast followers. We've had it up and running for a year. We have it in our largest markets. We're in the UK, Singapore, Mexico, Channel Islands, Hong Kong. Are the places we have it operating right now. As you saw, we're finding more financial crime faster with far less noise and far less calls out to customers asking them questions for what ultimately turned out to be a false positive. So overall, it's a great partnership. And if you want to hear more, we'll be talking about it during one of the panel sessions. Thank you.
Jen.
Okay, so financial services. When we talk actually to all of the industries, not only financial services, these three categories are the top use cases that we're seeing, top categories of use cases across all of the industries. All the three of them apply also to financial services, but we go later in the deeper dive to several of them. Online conversations, really having, the interface to your consumers for, having, easier human-like conversations for different types of demands that they might have, automation of call centers or things of that sort, but also internal ones, so that to make, increase the productivity of the employees. Really about, the second category being about, making sense and insights and answers from a complex set of data. When you have a structured and unstructured, many different sources of data, we're seeing that generative AI can actually help a lot in making it, make it easier to actually make sense out of that, extract insights, or simply extract answers or recommendations out of that. And third one is content generations, which we saw some examples of that already here, but you really can also think about, helping in the coding, helping into the documents to be generated, and so on. Now, when we look into the AI for finance industry, there is really a big possibility to transform, all of, the front, middle, and back offices. So we have seen that, you can get, you can add personalization and really get to the hyper-personalization setup. You can have, increase the productivity of through the, reducing the amount of time that you need to do for, research, for, completing the codes, for applying, the regulations that needs to be applied and so on. And all of this together is actually, summing up to, to important big numbers, that already, is estimated to be close to $500 billion in 2023. But my expectation is that this is only growing. And when you dig, when we go to the really dig one level deeper to the use cases that we're seeing, and we have been seeing, around 100 different use cases just for financial services being in development. There is some categories which really appears more and more in from different of the customers that we're talking to and working with, right? So first of all, again, personalization, we talked about it, but it's really thinking about to be very targeted, really the next best action, next best offer, and really to based on the situation of the customer, trying to recommend that. Secondly, things such as, lending, for example, it's a complex process, complex documents. You need to actually check, in a complex non-structured document regulations and so on, but you also want to generate new documents for that, so making that significantly easier and faster. You want to, for example, have the virtual assistant again to be internally or externally available to you to make you more productive. You can have code change consultant. There are regulations that needs to be respected and will end up, in change in requirements to change code. This is, of course, a time-consuming and complex task, and you can actually count on generative AI to make that easier for you. Again, many aspects of making employees more productive. When a new employee is joining a bank, for example, and needs to learn from all the potential procedures and services and documents and all those thousand pages documents that needs to be respected for several procedures and conversations. I think these are all types of things that you can really make an interface towards those resources to make things more productive. And of course, risk management. Really, you want to be able to identify, what potentials for risks are. You have to you synthesize. You want to be able to synthesize tests, for example, for really testing the robustness of the system against these tests, these challenges, and of course find all the types of patterns that will be there. So again, this is a large array of use cases which is possible and benefits. But for achieving that, you can't use just BART as it is or ChatGPT. Those are consumer products. And you want to have actually, and really an enterprise version of these products. So, for example, when we think about consumers, you really are thinking about all these types of new types of features. Some of the ones I showed, that these are, fancy new use cases that you can use, and they're good, of course. But in enterprise use cases, you always want certain, properties. You want a control on the data. What happens to this data? Is it, respecting all those, regulations and privacy concerns and security aspect that we really care about? It's, against, how do we deal with the fraud in this case and so on. So is it explainable? Is it accurate? Or is it, from time to time, hallucinates and actually can cause big problems? Is it, what's the cost? Typically speaking, a cost of a model can be, when it's 10 times bigger, can be 10 times more expensive. So that's a really big topic of concern. Now, we talked about the magics of large language models. It feels like a human. It can be a problem solver. It's a low effort. It can be generating things. But if you want to actually really have an enterprise use case, each of the other boxes that you see here, each single one of them is important to be there. The lack of each of them can actually make you fail. So you want, of course, the compliance and data privacy with that to be respected. You want the answers to be grounded in your data. You don't want necessarily the large language model to generate an answer from a source or of part that has been reading, which might not be reliable, or just generate it actually, because they're good in generating things, right? You want the business logic to be respected. If you have a chatbot which is in front of your customers, you don't want the model to decide on its own. Now I come up with a different, different process or different amount of, discount that I can give and so on. So business logic has to be respected. So use that brain, but not, but still follow the business logic. You want it to be safe. You don't want it all of a sudden, to become toxic, for example, or say things that should not be said. You want it to be integrated to your backends and be able to do transactions. This should not be just for answering questions, but really integrated to the backends that you have. And cost is an important factor, as I mentioned. You don't want to use a trillion parameter model for solving, a report, a credit card challenge problem. So there's sometimes you might have an easy problem that you might want to make sure that what is the right size of model, what is the right level of investment that you want to be using for this, and how do you manage the cost that you're having for this problem. And last but not least, it's very important to be able to understand, debug, test, and be able to improve it. It's a wrong thing if we give you a product and then you tomorrow cannot change it and improve it and have to wait for the next versions of our models to come out. You have to have the full control here. So all of that is what we have been working on for the past many months, actually many years, several years, but really many months to the next level to make sure that our Google Cloud Generative AI offering is respecting those. And this is, we saw a slide similar to this a bit earlier today by Yo. And our offering is basically these two parts, right? It's Vertex AI, which is really about bringing all of the foundational models that we're building at Google, the best ones available to our cloud customers, and really the toolings which is around that, and how you can fine-tune it to your use cases and so on. These foundational models are all those different types that we just talked about. And then there is a generative AI app builder, which is a combination of a triangular structure in some sense. There is foundational models on one side. Then there's the enterprise search, like applying Google-like stack and Google search algorithm in some sense to your enterprise, documents, to the set of documents that you want to search on. And then there's a conversational AI layer, which connects it to the backends, which makes it, the back and forth conversation to going on, and the business logic respecting will be happen by that. So the combination of all these three together is what actually makes it possible to have that all those boxes working. If you want this thing to be grounded, you need to actually say that, okay, first start by searching, bring relevant documents and construct your answers from those relevant documents, and you have to be able to cite it, that where those documents are coming from. Or when you want things to be really the more performant, again, this combination is making it for you that the cost to be significantly lower, because you don't always want to actually call the biggest model to answer things when that is easily answered. Let's say, for example, in your FAQ website, you just might want to match that existing FAQ question and so on. The other boxes that you see on top of here, like Contact Center AI, Discovery AI, and of course AML AI, which we just heard a great announcement from that. All of these are also getting boosted and supercharged with generative AI, and really getting to the next level of benefits here. Of course, for all of enterprises, but perhaps for financial services as one of the highest priority one. Everything related to privacy and security, is really, really top of our mind. So, in short, everything that we have been doing already for Google Cloud products that we have been having for GCP products, which has been really, again, with the highest level of, a commitment to the control on the data in terms of privacy and security, applies also for all of our generative AI offerings. What that means is that, in short, your data is not being used for training any other model. The data from your company is not being used for any other company. When you fine-tune a model, that fine-tune, the parts which is mixing that adapter layers, it's treated like the customer data. So it's not being, again, used for any other models. Customers' data are encrypted by CMake, right? And anything which is going on the transition, it's also encrypted. So all of the types of works that we have been doing in all these years in terms of privacy and security, all of them applies here. So we strongly believe that we have the safest and the most secure and the best offering of AIs, generative AIs, in terms of when it comes into really respecting and paying the right level of attention to your data. So yes, we talked about all types of models. We can maybe what we can do now is that quickly see that this this Gen AI app builder and Vertex AI that I just talked about, how they can together be used for making different types of applications, and we'll follow from there. So let's quickly see the video. You are seeing things like multiple rounds of chats, keeping the context. When you come back again, you want to know that this is the same customer. You're seeing things such as really grounded questions in the data, and that triangular is actually what makes this possible. So Generative AI Studio is part of Vertex AI, which is basically allows you to go there and actually try different prompts. You can see prompt galleries, examples of things you can do. You can play with things just there, and when some types of prompts is interesting, you can actually embed it very directly into your applications and on your website. The Vertex AI Model Garden, on the other side, can actually help you to choose from all types of models that we are offering, plus the third-party models and open source models that we are going to add soon. Again, try to use this library to pick and choose, and if needed, fine-tune some of these, and again, build the right models for your use cases. Now, let's go into some more of examples that these types of solutions is enabling us to do. First of all, we want to talk about, again, personalization, because that's actually a big thing for, building trust, of course. And when you want to really are doing things which is very targeted to that person, quite often for many industries, but also for financial services, we're seeing that Companies are just dividing, their customers to like 3 buckets or a number of buckets, and that's this segment, and that segment. But what about if you're really targeting, very directly based on all of the behaviors before, based on all the spending matters, based on all of the communications which has happened. So this is really not anymore one-to-many. This is really one-to-one. So you bring all of that context in some sense to the prompt that you're doing with that large model, and let that brains of recommendations to happen, and in a very targeted way. In this case, you're seeing that that someone, for example, whose spending has been in a way that could have been benefiting from certain aspects of credit card for a cross sell or upsell, that you would in a very personalized and humanized way, we would write an email, auto-generated email to this person, which is offering that particular cross-seller offering. Now, the other aspect is really about we talked about complex amount of data which is out there, and this data is really not only the internal documents, but it's also about all of the of course the other companies' document reports, financial reports, and so on. It's getting more complex, even with all of the situational challenges which is there, whether it's a short-term one like geopolitical risks, or things such as long-term ones such as climate change, inflation, and so on. So put all of these parameters together, and you want to make decisions making, and really counting just on humans to make those calls is just not the right thing. You want the human and AI to help each other, and it turns out that generative AI is actually a big player here. So it can be a big game changer here. So we'll play a video. I'll talk over it, which is an example of someone who wants to generate some insights and which helps for decision making. Starting from, if you can play the video, please. So the person wants to get a look into, for example, Alphabet's financial reports, which is coming, and for that, to want to combine that with some of the historical ones to see that how, for example, the investments which Alphabet is doing on research and development has been changing over time. So it would be very easy in a matter of minutes to build something which is putting different types of data. Some of them could be structured, some of them could be totally unstructured. I know that our annual financial reports is it's pretty unstructured, it's complex, it's long, the language is very complex to understand, and really putting that and making it easy to search these things simply by uploading all the relevant documents, not only this year but also, for example, from the previous years, and then do these types of questions, semantic search on this to understand how things have changed over years. Checking accuracy should be easy because you want to have always put the sources here. Again, you want to augment humans in this case, not necessarily replace them, and you should be able, because it's a process that you want to research, so you want to have this continuation, ask more questions in this case, for example, for sustainability strategy, or by what time Google is getting carbon free. Again, finding those from the different sources. Now imagine you want to do this for many companies, and combine them and compare them. For example, you might have a sheet that with a portfolio of companies that you want to now again generate insights in a short amount of time. In this case, you would say, what are companies' commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Looking into all of those unstructured documents from different reports, from different companies, from the sources that we have been giving, generate that, and more actually things were coming. And now you might want to summarize that. Again, this is a summary one-pager in English generated, but why not if you want to generate the whole thing in Dutch, because you want to show it to a customer in Holland. Again, you can just convert that. Again, this is try to show many things in a matter of in this short demo, but I am sure that you all who have been understand these challenges in this research much better than me would connect a lot with such types of procedures. So, and we're seeing that not only in financial services but across industry. It's these types of complex research questions are becoming significantly more achievable. So again, it's exciting to see this, but let's see more use cases, more challenges, which is financial services specific. And these complex documents that you all have, like Basel III, 1,000 pages and so on, and which requires the institution to actually respect, with the documents or like code changes that needs to happen is typically a big pain. These are not things that developer who is actually writing the code can understand and read those 1,000 pages documents. So it's very important to try to optimize that effort. And typically speaking, from what I understood but in my conversations, like engineers and product and actually the experts in understanding those documents have to talk a lot to each other and back and forth. Of course, when you want to change the code, you might break things. You might, there's all those other types of, security aspects which comes to the picture and so on. So really trying to make it possible to identify, these complex, changes that needs to happen in the code automatically. By understanding first the documents and regulations and connecting into the code is things that we are trying to offer with this use case of code change consultant. And we're seeing again a very nice examples, like in this case, it just asks to go and find all of the SQL queries which needs to be updated. It's not only finds them, basically it's connecting with the changes which is happening. It finds those pieces of code and it actually recommends also what they have to be changed to. So again, big save in time save in productivity. Now we talked about coding in this case in some sense. Financial services are one of the biggest employers for developers after, I guess, the IT companies. I think the second biggest. And a big cost also, and for good reasons. I think you need developers, but I think the reality is, as was mentioned already before by Yo, the development is becoming easier job, and thanks to these large language models. And there's a series of enhancements which are coding models, which we call it Cody, is actually is offering. So on one hand, you actually can easily ask questions and say that, hey, how can I write a function which does something? And then just get the answer to that. Typically speaking, a big fraction of developers spend a non-small time, really between half an hour and 1 hour every day to just researching, how do I do these things and how do I do that other thing. So really, having this interface where you can ask questions and generate, recommendations for what you need to code, it's going to be a big save for developers. In this case, for example, you're seeing that the question is generate the Python code for a TensorFlow, which does a classification using MNIST dataset. MNIST dataset is a dataset for the image recognition for numbers. Again, you just get that. And there's also, the sources of this, where this code is taken from, so that you actually can also verify and see how this in other places has been used. You can, of course, do the multi-turn chat. So if this code that you're getting, there's a part of that you don't understand. For example, in this case, there's Adam optimizer, optimizer equal Adam. And you want to say that, okay, what is Adam optimizer? What are my other options? And again, try to get that answer. So this is like having an expert developer like shadowing you and be available for you all the time. It actually is, super helpful, even in companies like Google, which we have, I think, good developers, but really, adding, helping us with lots of productivity time. And, again, the one thing I actually like myself is the autocomplete features. When you have this code generation really integrated in the IDE. So the way it works is that you are typing the code, and then you type few letters of, or comment of the function that you're going to write. And then, like something that you see here in gray, there's an autocomplete. You just press on the tab, and that 4 lines, for example, gets generated. So really imagine autocomplete for the code, because many pieces of the code that developers write is very similar to all the other codes which have been written in the world in the past. So really you can save big amounts of time for with this feature, with these types of integrated tech. Also writing the tests, for example. Writing the test is just you just say write test basically in tab, and then there's test generation, and that's very, very important for coders, of course. and the enterprise solutions in particular. Of course, the quality of the code is increasing, the consistency of the code is increasing, and respecting, really the code review, debugging, all those types of things is getting, boosted with this. So big time save also for the developers. Again, very relevant also for financial services. That's not only this, productivity gains, not only, of course, for developers in this case, but also I showed the Gmail example, how you can write, faster emails that you can just, just say a couple of words and then get those emails being generated. Many of the emails being written, of course, in the financial services also are, more, structured in some sense, so those are even easier to be generated. Then there is, of course, the document generation. You saw some examples of that in the video. There's a presentation generation, there's a sheet updates and so on. So all of that also, as part of our Duet AI offering is bringing, helping with a nice amount of extra, save in productivity. Now, let's talk about conversational AI a little bit, which is my field actually. In order to talk about that, I just want to first show a video on how interactions with the brands is changing through these chatbots or conversational interfaces, and what would that mean for the interactions that we have with the customers, but also with the behind the scenes for the agents, which is talking potentially. So let's play the video, please. And I will talk on the video. So here you have, for example, a fictional bank example where you have the chat. You have the chat this chatbot in some sense beside on the website itself. You can ask natural language questions. It answers, but also it actually navigates you to the right part of the web page on the website itself, so that you actually have more content. Context and content. You can follow on these questions. There's both the sources of those answers. These answers are grounded, as we said, thanks to those triangle, solutions that we're using. The answers are personalized. In this case, the person is logged in on the website itself. This is synchronized, so you can interact with the website or with the chatbot. It's not true and best that always interact with the chatbot. You actually want to always use the best possible, combination. When the answers might actually come from 3 different pages of the website and get combined, and the sources will be mentioned there. And this is why it's faster and than the linearly going through the website itself. Whenever the answers is not working well, or it's a sentiment, or the answers is not known, you should always have this possibility of, live engine handoff, or when there's, important moment in the conversation. Now we're switching to see that when you go to the live agent, in the live agent view, what we're seeing, this is the kind of the agent assist in some sense. You can see document suggestions based on the conversation which is happening. You can those documents, you can basically, the agent can look into them and type some of the answers based on those information, and this can, these answers in cases can be just, pre-populated, suggested answers that with one click you can send it back. You can edit that answer and get more. Again, think about it, how more productive this person is becoming. Quite often when you call a call center, a person might be saying, let me look into it. The person is actually trying to learn what should answer. The answer lookup's becoming faster. You have this shadow person, which makes you more productive, which is there with you. And at the end of the conversation, you can have the summary generated. And this summary typically, for example, for a call center takes 1-2 minutes. And that can be generated now, in a couple of seconds. And this summary can also be sent to the person, of course. This is the summary of the calls that we just had, or the interactions that we had. And of course, be used for the transfers and for everything which happens next in the future with that customer. This is an example of the summary which is generated. And a Google Cloud icon. Okay, so what you saw in the past was very complex to be built. But now, thanks to Gen AI, this is really becoming, I heard minutes earlier, it is really minutes to build simple chatbots. You can in days make fancy chatbots, you know. So building a chatbot which answers questions from your website, it's minutes. This is what you see on the left-hand side. You just give, and we saw some examples at the sources of data. This is the whole website, maybe some other website, some repository of documents, and press on a few clicks and buttons, and then you generate the first version of backbone of what you're building. Then there's pre-built flows. So many of the flows of conversations are very similar. So if you have pre-built versions of those things, you don't need to rebuild that all the time. What's maybe the biggest change is this third one, or third and fourth, which is the same thing, is that these days, now, thanks to Gen AI and large language models, we just talk about, the higher level business logic, as opposed to going, to try to find all the potential things which can happen. Let me explain that. When you make a call to today's chatbots, and let's say a chatbot is asking you, what's your credit card number? And let's say you don't have your credit card with you. You might say, let me go and take my wallet. Today's voice bot will answer, sorry, I don't understand. What's your credit card number? Because that logic of I am going to take my wallet, of course, it's not implemented in that flow. But also the brain of that, the brain of these bots in the past really need to really see that all potential, things that can happen. Here can fail, here can fail, here can fail. Makes, very complex, logic graphs combined with the effects of language. But now we're saying that instead of that, just explain the high-level business logic. A high-level business logic could be get the credit card number, a security code, and X, and then do that. So that's it. If the security code was not 3 letters, was 6 letters, it's the common sense of the model which should, come into the picture and say that, hey, look, this number was wrong. Give me another try again, and so on. Don't implement those things. And this thing, for example, is really an example of that complex, unmaintainable things that you see on top. It's a real industry graph. Which has been built over months, and as opposed to the lower one, which is a significantly lower time, actually a day, I think, in that order, and significantly number of pages. But this one actually works better because this is expanded with an LLM beside it. It's this graph plus an LLM beside it. So that's actually, how the conversational bots are getting to the next level. We have, the pre-built examples that I mentioned, whether it's credit card number, lots of, use cases which have been already built using large language models. So it's very easy. You can play, really drag and drop and say that, okay, these are use cases which I want that my chatbot or my call center voice bot that I'm making to be supporting. And then, really having a version of those, potentially customize it a little bit for different aspects that you might have there. And all of this together, of course, can make really your call centers, which is another part of your the big cost in at least the bigger organizations to be big safe. Virtual agents can make contain and a big number of fraction of the calls that is coming to the to the call center. And of course, these days, with Gen AI, this is either going to the bigger containment numbers. We're seeing typically 60% pre-Gen AI, and now we're seeing a nice jump into that. So it's an important number in the cost saving that you actually can have for the call centers. Then there's agent assist, which is when it goes to the agents, as I showed, that you can have these supercharged agents now that they have this, fancy shadow LLM-based, thingy, which is helping them to answer things if necessary and makes them more productive. And of course, there's also insights, which is looking into all the calls together and says that, okay, these are the trends that we're seeing. These are the types of the questions which are not being answered. These are the opportunities for cross-sell that we're seeing. These are the successful cross-sell or upsell things that we have been seeing, and trying to generate all those insights. And all of this together, and we have our platform also is really trying to help to bring the call center efficiency, and again, another cost saving, which is in direction of, called conversational AI and generative AI. I cannot emphasize enough, and this is why I repeat nearly this slide, on how important it is to use generative AI for your internal productivity increase. This is every company in the world. I bet with you in the next 1-2 years, we'll have different internal tools, Gen AI powered, which is making employees more productive. Banks are one of the more complex ones, so it's very important and very clear value, less risks also because it's internal, to really have this entity, this assistant internally, which is answering all these types of questions. It will make your employees more productive, so please do it. And now, Responsible AI. All of this, that we talked about. Of course, generative AI comes with the new types of challenges and new types of risks. And we at Google Cloud have been, really our top of mind has been to make, the responsible AI and whatever requires to make, enterprises successful in that sense to be really in the heart of our offering. So this ranges from, of course, controlling your IP, which I just talked about. Your data is your data, not being used for other models. To the fact that choice and value, because you don't want to go for the most expensive solutions. There is actually often significantly cheaper solutions that you will be able to have there, grounded in factuality, using the search technology that we have, the triangle, which I said many times, to actually help you with that groundedness. Easy to get started, minutes to build the first thing. So there's no reason, no excuse for you to not try it. And the entry bar is low, but the customization is really, the ceiling is high. So we actually can customize it and add all types of business logic, is complex, transactions that you want to make it significantly more, powerful. And of course, security at the scale, really having all of the things that we have, the work that we have been doing in Google Cloud Security also be available for all of our Gen AI offerings. And of course, things such as data residency and CMake. Responsible AI is not something that we started, of course, with generative AI. This has been, for many years now, we have been, publishing our AI principles. And this AI principles, just to explain you, it actually is getting applied on every AI work that we do at Google. It takes things a bit slower, but of course very important to prevent challenges for us in the future. So we have been publishing this. Every particular change in AI happening at Google goes through a review to get approval in terms of respecting all of these principles. And of course, Gen AI is bringing new types of challenges also. It's getting easier to generate, for example, fake content and so on. So it's not only Google's job, of course. It's all of the policymakers, governments, other AI players, research universities, institutions. They all have to work together to actually upgrade and try to understand what's the right way of preventing misuse of generative AI. So that's a big topic that will be there for the next few months and years. But till then, the opportunity is very, very big. That $500 billion that we talk about, that report is actually not including all of the Gen AI actually magic which was coming. So it's very important, in my humble opinion, that you need to be bold. You need to try to use this opportunity. You need to do it, of course, responsible, and we want to do that way. And we are inviting all of you to actually, explore these use cases together and try to help, your organizations to get benefit of this. And with that, thank you. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. Good afternoon. Everyone stretch, get comfortable. I see a lot of movement going on. Now, we've heard a lot of conversation this morning or this afternoon. I was told that somebody was keeping track of the number of times we mentioned the word AI or generative. Beneath your seats, you will find actually a gift from Google. I'm just kidding. For the person who can guess the most number of times we mentioned AI this afternoon. Needless to say, we're in the middle of a step function change in the industry. And we thought it'd be wonderful to hear directly from leaders in the institutions and the industry that are paving the way using these technologies. So I'd love to invite our panelists to come up on stage over here, and thank you for making time. Please come on up. Thank you. Excellent. Please. All right. Beautiful. So I have the pleasure of being joined today with Kevin Cole, Head of Digital AI over at Wells Fargo, Siki Ballard, CEO of Beta Bank, based out of Chicago. Of course, and I'm biased for Chicago, I'm from there. We have Julie Winkler from the CME Group, Chief Commercial Officer, and of course, Tamika Anderson, the Global Industry Head for Consumer and Retail Banking over at Citi. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Excellent. So we've had a lot of conversations this afternoon about innovation, and I'd like to think of it as a step function change in how these new technologies perhaps may be impacting our industry. I thought it'd be fun to maybe take a step back from just the technology part of the conversation for a minute and maybe start with 2-3 basic questions to our panelists this afternoon. One is, what are the 2 or 3 things that you see on the horizon that you believe might have an impact in the respective sectors of the industry that you represent? And as you think about those areas, what are the obstacles that you see that might be in the way of you being able to fully realize the value of then those areas of impact, and how are you thinking about investments in those areas? So maybe, Kevin, we can start with yourself.
Sure, yeah. In terms of the things that will impact our customers, I think the generative AI component is absolutely huge. I think we can't underestimate how much it will shift our customers' expectations. I think the expectations are still the same. People want simple, easy, fast, secure experiences here. But I think what we're starting to see is how much we can evolve that experience with generative AI is that step function to where how we meet that bar of fast, simple, easy, secure will be fundamentally different. Within our digital banking experiences, I think the first shift was going to digital, where we made things more convenient, more accessible, available 24/7. I think as we start to see the application of generative AI, the question will really be around how do you not just make it accessible, but how do you do more of the work for people, right? How do you bring it to them? How do you help understand and predict their cash flows, help them do some of the math for them that, quite frankly, as an industry, we are not doing today at scale. When you start to see some of these technologies, you can see the magic and the potential in it. Like, we are surely in the very early stages of this technology, but you see the potential that it has to be able to embed in our experiences reasoning, personalization, more complex fluid interactions than what we can do today. So when I think about the things that are kind of the obstacles to that, I mean, obviously it's something very new, and we are all in a regulated industry, so we need to make sure that we are kind of rolling out experiences that are accurate and aligned and predictable, all those things. But when you look at the sheer pace of the development in this space, I have never seen anything that is evolving as quickly in this space. Literally every day there's a new thing out that says, hey, here's a new approach to this. So I think you literally have to assume that within 6 months, within 12 months, all the major problems will be largely solved, right? And so the question is how do you start to experiment with this to fundamentally transform the way that we deliver, in our case, digital experiences to our customers?
I would add to that I think expectations around trust and transparency are changing. With the failure of recent banks, I think people for the first time are starting to wonder what happens to my money when I deposit it. This is a fractional banking system we operate in. When you deposit your funds, banks certainly do not keep 100% of your funds, your deposit funds on hand. They do things with it. And they do things with it that create risk for the bank, that create risk for the customer. When SVB collapsed, we saw a pretty meaningful migration of deposits from regional-sized banks, community banks, going into larger banks like Bank of America or JP Morgan. And I think that's the explanation for why those deposits moved. People tend to think that they can trust the bigger organizations more than the smaller ones, that their funds are safer with the bigger organizations versus the smaller ones. So I think at a macro level, this is something that people are more interested in. And I want to apply it very specifically to lending, which is a very big function of banks. If you submit an application for a small business loan, it's kind of a black box. It goes into the bank. You either get rejected or you get accepted or approved for the loan. You don't really know context around why you were rejected or why you were approved. And so I think it's kind of almost a mystical process for customers. And I think the degree to which we can leverage new technologies to help pull the wool back from the opaqueness of banking to provide people with more clarity on what's happening, when they submit a loan application. Maybe rather than my application just being bank facing, I can see the analysis of myself that's facing me. I can get insights on what I can do with my cash flow to be more bankable, to be more attractive to a bank for a loan. These are things that I think increase transparency in banking, ultimately increase trust among customers. And I think that's what they're demanding. We see it today, and I think it's only going to increase in the future.
Couldn't agree more. Julie.
Yeah, I guess we come at it from a little different perspective of looking at it from our institutional customer base. And after spending lots of years on trading desks, you realize that the front office has very, very short fuses. And so I get excited thinking about this technology of how can I improve the efficiencies of when my sales team is in there talking to them about a new product, getting a new idea. How can I make that experience better than, and also what they're just experiencing from a consumer perspective? So to me, this is kind of bringing that consumer world into our working life, which is, I think, part of that step change function that you talked about. Because to me, that's how you're ultimately going to get back to what's predictive about what they need. How am I better using analytics to serve that? And time is money. And so for clients, if we're not able to be responsive to a trade issue that they have or understanding what their position is in the marketplace, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. And so being able to use this type of technology to speed up our response rates, our accuracy, it's going to have immediate value.
Fascinating. Yeah. Tamika, any comments?
I guess, and maybe to put a point on it, like part of, as a commercial banker, part of our remit is to really provide content and thought work to our clients. And, that ability to do that is really, magnified when we have, technology available to be able to not only, maximize the use of the data that we sit on as an institution, but the data of the broader piece. So bringing that all together and being able to operationalize that and do it in a very, what the customer expects from a very speedy way and a highly accurate way, and then finally a hyper-personalized way is really, I think, sort of really, at the precipice in terms of the changes that we see and where the opportunity is.
Fascinating. If I zoom out from just the commentary over here, I hear we want to make sure we establish trust. We want to make sure that we improve that customer experience and the interactions and the quality of those interactions. But we want to do that in a highly precise way because there is a lot at stake, and we want to do that in a highly regulated way to make sure that we're compliant with how we kind of achieve those outcomes. Julie, we spent a lot of time talking about these various technologies and the impact, in the industry, whether that's data type of analytic capabilities that have been coming about for the past few years, machine learning, that brought some intelligence and predictive capabilities all the way out to AI and now generative capabilities. You touched a little bit on the enablement of the field and how some of these new technologies kind of enhance, say, for example, the sales and the field teams, when they come back in. Can you dive a little bit into how you think about these technologies and the top use cases you see from the view of the exchanges and the applicability in your particular space?
Yeah, I think given the regulatory environment, I think a lot of this will initially start in financial service, pretty internally focused. So we saw, a number of use cases talked about earlier, where people are spending a lot of time doing content generation. I had a team in Asia that hadn't seen customers in 4 years. They did a 3-week roadshow in China with many, many customer visits. All of that content had to be translated back into English, put back into Salesforce, summarized, aggregated. It probably took another 2 weeks out of the field after spending that 3 weeks. I mean, you start to think about at the end of the day, what they say, maybe a third of a person's sales time is actually spent in front of a customer.
Wow.
This to me has dramatic impacts of being able to improve that. As well as I think, just finding talent that maybe is not as deeply versed in some of the subject matter expertise that we're all talking about. I think where you build out knowledge centers and you just make that information much more accessible to the organization, it's no longer going to be about, doing your time, I'd say, in financial services. I think we're going to be able to ramp up talent much quicker. And I think, it's something we haven't really discussed much today, but I think how we manage talent through this process is going to be really kind of a critical part of the adoption rate and the ultimate success of it. There's a lot of people within financial services with deep experience that are not deeply skilled in technology, and how are we going to train them to get comfortable with this? I saw a study the other day which talked about if you asked the average executive how excited they were about generative AI, they were all like, oh yeah, this is similar to the stats we saw,
96%.
85%, 60%, it's going to be great. You ask the average worker, and it's more like in the 30s, right? Because to them, this feels threatening, right? So how are we going to meet this in the middle? How are we going to find, to me, kind of those pilot groups within our organizations where we can try some of these use cases on inside sales teams, content generation, research, economic research. I love the aggregation on the financial analyst reports. Things that people can start seeing as non-threatening, as efficiency gaining. I think that's where we begin. And then once you get towards being able to really analyze the client-sensitive data around there, that's when I think you start to see the massive impact on the organization and your clients.
Interesting. I want to come back later on to the process for innovation in that context, but also the cultural change that needs to occur in order to have the talent match kind of how you're going to be able to unlock these capabilities. Sticking to the topic of use cases, Siki, I was thinking about Beta Bank, and my understanding is the genesis of the bank really came from this notion of being able to improve and bring fair and accessible banking services to small businesses. A lot of that, from my understanding, has been data-driven in how you've thought about maturing these services. In fact, I think even through a lot of ML and data capabilities, you were actually able to reduce the implied default rates for loans that are being underwritten by the bank compared to, let's say, traditional practices. With that in context, how do you think about these new technologies and the implications for how you might be bringing services out to small businesses? Where do you kind of see this future evolving in your space?
Sure. So all things being equal from a financial perspective, so you have the same income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, there are certain subgroups of small business owners who have a harder time getting loans. So almost 3 times more likely to be rejected for a loan. And if you get the loan, you're going to pay about 2 percentage points more in interest. This is true for more or less for minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. And what we've observed in our research is that when someone is applying for a loan, more often than not, they're going into a physical branch, they're speaking to a loan officer, to a banker, who's not just evaluating what's written on paper about the merits of the business, but they're performing so-called character tests. So they're making subjective determinations as to whether you look trustworthy, whether you fit whatever archetype they have in their minds of what a successful business owner looks like. And that is the biggest opportunity for bias to introduce itself into the loan underwriting equation. And so I think our big aha was, what does it look like to remove the human from the equation and base analysis of credit risk based exclusively on observable financial and operating data about that business? And so we aggregated a pretty big source of data from the Small Business Administration and other sources, and train that model or use that data to train a model to assess the risk or probability of a business defaulting on a loan, relying only on the factors in that data set versus a human bring their own subconscious biases to the table. And we were able to build a model that can determine the probability of a business defaulting on a loan with 98.2% accuracy. So this has about a 1.8% implied default rate. If you compare that to the Small Business Administration, their trailing 10-year default rate on their biggest loan program, which is 7A, is about 17.6%. So it's pretty night and day in terms of performance. So not only do you arrive at an outcome leveraging machine learning, do you arrive at an outcome where the accuracy of your decisioning is higher, but you're deciding on credit risk based exclusively on the merits. So it's a way of leveling the playing field while at the same time creating efficiencies for the organization. And so that's how we've approached lending historically with our model. In terms of forward-looking, the other big driver in the different lending outcomes we see with minority or women-owned businesses is preparedness. So when you come to a banker, are your financials in order? Do you have the documents that they're asking for? Is the level of rigor that went into creating your financial statements, does it essentially create reliable financial statements? That's where I think generative AI has a lot of promise in terms of helping small businesses bridge that preparedness gap. If you're a small business in a place like Gary, Indiana, you're not going to get white glove service from a bank that's going to give you a banker, and that banker is going to tell you all the things you need to do to, I call it, make yourself more bankable. So you're kind of off on your own. And I think this information asymmetry between well-established businesses, those with a lot of resources given to them by banks, I think that information asymmetry can be collapsed using generative AI. Obviously taking what it knows about the business and being able to provide insights based on how that business looks in comparison to other companies in its industry, other companies in its geography. So all in all, I believe that machine learning AI has the potential to really level the playing field with respect to lending, because I think it addresses two of the chief drivers for why we see different outcomes within lending.
Fascinating. So interestingly enough, if I just parent that back, really it was the human interaction on the onset that made it a little less transparent into the bankability of, say, a small business. And so you used ML technology to try and enhance and collapse that data asymmetry in those decisionings. Kevin, I'm thinking about kind of the opposite side of this for a minute. I know that there have been rapid advancements in the space of conversational AI and the ability for then those AI technologies to become not just conversant, but actually personalized and curated to particular clients' experiences. I know at Wells Fargo, Kevin, yourself and Michelle have been working very closely on Fargo, which is Wells Fargo's chat capabilities. Can you talk a little bit about what have been some of the experiences that you've seen from customers thus far with this new kind of capability from the bank, and where do you see it evolving again in that interaction layer?
Yeah, so we've been really happy with the response thus far. We started to roll out to customers a little under 2 months ago. In that first month, we had more than 1 million people interact with Fargo, and then in the month since, we've more than doubled that, right? So we're seeing our customers are really responding. They're getting to know Fargo, what it can do for it, and we're seeing a nice range of things where Fargo is helping out with that customer experience. Anything from answering common customer questions like, what's my routing number, how do I set up direct deposit, all the way to performing transactions like sending money, the quick and simple, easy way to do that to their friends, or even just getting insights into where they're spending their money. So we're seeing as a really nice complement to the mobile app, but I'd say where we are right now is kind of the table stakes for what customers expect. As we look forward, there's really 2 places we're focused. The first is really around how do we expand this capability to serve more of our customer segments, right? So in the fall, we'll start to provide Fargo in Spanish, which when you look across the industry, there's very few of these capabilities. They're actually available beyond English, right? And we would not have been able to do that as quickly and easily without our partnership with Google. So testament there. We're really excited about that because I think that is a population that is relatively underserved and we think can provide a bunch of value. But then ultimately, I think where a lot of this is headed is really on that theme of doing more for our customers, right? A lot of our interactions have shifted from physical to the digital channels, and those been mostly around providing information, transacting, things like that. But you've lost kind of some of the ability or the moments to generate a relationship with our customers. So in the winter, Fargo will start to take a more proactive role in assisting our customers, really monitoring their transactions, keeping an eye on their finances, and proactively giving our customers a heads up on things that are important, specific to them. And it'll be different to every different type of person as Fargo starts to learn. It could be, hey, we're monitoring your cash flows, and we'll let you know how much you need to set aside to pay your upcoming expenses. Or, hey, if there's a shortfall, we'll let you know ahead of time. Could be as simple as, hey, you tend to come in and check for things like, when did that Amazon refund come in? We'll greet you at the door without you having to ask. So I think a lot of where this is going is, how do we start to employ this technology to do more of the work for our customers and think on their behalf? And we create those little moments where we build that trust with our customers.
Interesting. So there's like two things there that I thought were really interesting. One is there's the expansion of the capabilities across more segments and making it customized to the actual client itself. But second, I have to imagine maybe also the lift that you're able to address a larger customer segment by simply being able to address a larger language segment. Was a pretty significant shift.
Yeah, and I think this is a lot of what we're starting to see is the ability to meet people where they are, right? As we digitize our business and we enable more and more within our little 6-inch screen, right? Like, there's more stuff that's getting pushed further back. We're starting to teach our customers, like, hey, yes, you can go and find what you need, but like, we'll also enable you to converse with us, right? Just like you would a human being. And I think what's really exciting as we look forward 5-10 years, I think we'll start to just see apps and experiences that are very natural, more like a liquid UI, where it responds to what our customers say or their behavior, right, versus this being a rigid thing. And I think that orchestration of that experience is really important to be able to address each individual user's personal journey, right? Because you are not your bank account, and everyone's financial journey is different and individual, right, as evidenced by these things. And I think we're enabling our digital channels to engage in a deeper conversation with our customers to understand them.
Amazing. Thank you. Tamika. So we've heard a little bit from the market, from small business, retail. I know commercial banking, wildly different space to be in. Maybe share a few thoughts about how you think about innovation in that particular space and how you're thinking about technologies being applicable and driving some of the acceleration of that innovation.
Well, I think what's interesting is it's hard to discuss commercial banking without really discussing technology and innovation. And I say that because by nature, we're serving like small and medium-sized entities. And so oftentimes these are, smaller scale, businesses that honestly need the power and the scale to be able to operate across the space. But what makes it, even more interesting when you think about the innovation and some of what, Kevin has been talking about just from the retail perspective, these are individuals engaging with the bank. And so often what they bring is sort of that expectation of what they're experiencing as an individual customer or consumer into their commercial banking experience, which means that as a commercial bank, we have to step up and also bring sort of really those flexible like platforms that will address really their most complex issues in the most simple, straightforward way possible. So what I see is that, we are, spending a lot of time really looking at that, whatever that platform is, that gateway into the bank, and how can we really bring together all of the customers' experiences, whether it be their lending experience, how they manage their foreign exchange, their risk management, their cash management, all into one platform, one gateway into the bank. So that it's very seamless and they're not running around with all of these, like we did years ago, these key fobs and different codes to get into different parts
Some still are.
I know, we still are. Different parts of the institution. So I think, we'll continue to see that. And again, all driven by, customer expectations and what we really, when I think about innovation, it is really that active sort of pace at change, but also the importance of bringing in really the client experience. And so as a bank and within banking, you see more of the commercial banks really bringing in the customer into that co-creation experience to be able to bring forth whatever that next piece is. Kevin, I don't even know how you even possibly talk about 5 to 10 years from now, because like you said, 3 months from now, all the problems today will be solved. So it's hard to even imagine what's coming.
It is a breakneck speed, pace of change. Speaking of which, Julie, I know you and I were talking about accelerating that change and the impact it's having to the business. I don't know, from my landscape, it feels like innovation almost always goes hand in hand with some level of investment to go drive that said innovation. What seems to be really difficult in that equation is, of course, measuring success in a reasonable time frame and trying to figure out what return on that investment might look like. Most innovation projects, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone in the audience, most don't always make it to the goal line. But the right ones do. I'd like to believe that. I'd love for you to maybe share some commentary about the innovation program at CME and how you're thinking about measuring that success and kind of making sure that more make it to that goal line than not, and what that return on investment maybe looks like from your point of view.
I think a lot of it relates back to what Yo was saying and Tamika as well. I mean, when we started our own innovation lab at CME, we did a lot of research on what other companies were doing out in the space. And there's a lot of different models. And I think you really kind of have to be a student of design thinking. You have to figure out how you're going to put the customer at the center of what you do. And then you're going to have to adopt that model to the culture, the IT, kind of architecture and climate that you have. For us, we really kind of look at it across a few different dimensions. A key part of it, and for us being a highly regulated financial institution, it was how are we going to continue to innovate around our core? How are we going to look at adjacent spaces where maybe there's new customers or new market opportunities? And then what are those moonshots for us that we would call kind of in that frontier? And I think just comparing CME to Google Cloud, our allocations across that innovation portfolio are very different. There's no meeting that I don't sit in with our partners at Google Cloud where it's not starting with, okay, what's the 10x idea here, right? And you have to have that, right? But I also think it's this blend of how are you thinking about that portfolio more generally, as well as how are you measuring that impact. So for us, it is about where we can develop new commercial opportunities, so it is revenue driven, but we also are spending a lot of time just about value creation. So where are there just cost inefficiencies that are in the system today? Where is there maybe IP leakage that we could better control if we had better access to our data and permissioning throughout the process? And kind of working with our friends in finance to put numbers behind that. It's an art form, I'd say, more than a science. And I think a lot of what I'm sure everyone in this room is going to get tested with in the coming months is, as we're putting more investment into things like Gen A, what is going to be the ROI on these things? And so I think it's about making sure those use cases are very specific. I think time boxing those projects is also an important part of it. Sometimes there's not real good stage gates in these projects. They're too big, they're too lumpy. And you can't actually measure things from A to B because it's just taking too long. So we've found taking an agile approach to this stuff is far more helpful. And then just making that a lot more transparent throughout so that people ask questions and it gets a bit more demystified along the way. But I think the pace of that change, is increasing. And I think, sometimes what we're seeing is challenging within financial services. I mean, many of us are trying to solve the exact same problems, but we're doing it within our own four walls. And, I think that's where having a partner like Google Cloud that's working with all of us and can bring people together so that we're kind of jointly solving these things. We're coming up with industry solutions. Otherwise, we're all just spending money, time, and resources trying to kind of fix the same customer problems that I think we can do better collectively.
Can I comment on that?
Please.
I think one of the interesting things about innovation is that when you have something like an innovation team or a project team focused on solving a problem, it's almost like innovation is the job of that team and it's not the job of anybody else.
Yep.
And that team is almost always starting with a business problem and working its way backward to solve that business problem. Probably the reason they fail so often. You have fewer of them that succeed. Whereas I think when innovation is pervasive throughout the whole organization. If everybody is challenged to invent and simplify, to think bigger about whatever it is that they're doing, then it seems like it would almost come more naturally from the organization, more organically in terms of how it's structured. I don't know how you infuse that throughout an entire organization that's got decades of history behind it. We are a tiny new company, so it's a little bit easier to do it from our vantage, but that's just sort of a view that I have on why innovation almost seems like it's this siloed thing that's somebody else's responsibility, and if it succeeds, it will be integrated into the broader company.
There's a cultural component, there's a building a flywheel component, there's an accountability factor to this. I think it's a fascinating conversation that I think will continue over our cocktail hour here shortly. I want to thank the panelists for making time for us over here today. Deeply appreciative of the work you do and the partnership we have with Google Cloud. Thank you very much. With that,
Thank you.
Please.